Hello everybody, my name is Cameron and today we're going to be looking at adaptation, interdependence and competition. In particular, levels of organization, abiotic as well as biotic factors, interdependence, counting organisms and competition within the animal kingdom and plants as well. So let's talk about levels of organization. So first we have a community. A community is when different populations of different species is going to be interacting and living in the same habitat. An ecosystem is what we call the interaction of these communities with the abiotic factors of that area. So the abiotic factors being the non-living factors. So the way that they're able to interact with the abiotic factors is through natural selection as well as adaptation of these specific species. We have interspecies competition, so this is between different species. Okay, you can remember that. Let me just get my laser. Inter, that T-E-R. E-R is the same as different. Okay, so interdifferent species. Whereas intra-species competition is between members of the same species. Intra-a, same. Okay, so interdifferent, intra, same. Okay, so if you have interspecies competition, it's between different species. This can be such as in Alaska, they have bears and wolves. Okay, they might be in competition with each other for food. Okay, intraspecies competition is between members of the same species. This could be like two groups of chimpanzees living in an area. Okay, there'll be an intra-specific competition with each other, again for food and for territory. And yeah, organisms are going to be competing for food, water and shelter. Okay, as well as mating rights if it's intra-specific. Plants are going to be competing for light, water, minerals, ions and space, while animals are going to be competing mainly for food, space and water. Okay, so let's have a look at some abiotic factors. So firstly, we have light intensity. Light intensity is obviously going to control the amount of photosynthesis takes place and the growth of plants. The amount of plants is then going to affect the amount of food that is available for the ecosystem, as well as providing shelter. Okay, so oxygen levels. This is specifically important in water aquatic environments, as it is abundant when it comes to on land, as it is everywhere, but when it comes to water environments, it is a lot more concentrated in certain areas of the depths and depending on where the plants are as well. Okay, so yeah, most fish are going to need high concentrations of oxygen to survive, as they only have that singular circulatory system, so it has to be as efficient as possible. Interestingly enough as well, a fish's gills are a lot more efficient at taking in oxygen than animal lungs are, and this is because the oxygen concentration in water varies a bit more, you see. Another one is temperature. So temperature is going to affect the rate of photosynthesis as well as denaturing cells if it's too high. So that's another adaptation that some plants have to have. Soil pH and minerals, again, going to affect photosynthesis and how quickly plants grow. It's also going to affect the rate of decay, okay, and how quickly the carbon is going to be recycled in the environment. So in a highly acidic environment, it could be carbon deficient, as most of the carbon is still sitting there and not decaying, not being broken down. Okay, then water, obviously moisture levels are going to be important for all living things. If there's no water, the things have to be adapted to living in that environment where water is scarce. Your CO2 concentrations, again, that's important for photosynthesis, and it dictates which species are going to be able to grow there. Okay, certain species can deal with lower carbon dioxide concentrations than others. And your wind intensity. So wind intensity is going to affect water loss, which again affects photosynthesis. Okay, so we have light intensity, oxygen levels, temperature, soil pH, water, CO2, and the wind. These are the main abiotic factors. So some of the biotic factors that we have to take into consideration when talking about an ecosystem include food availability. So the more food a species has, or an organism has for that matter, the bigger it will grow, the more it's going to reproduce. Next is competition. So we've talked about this. If one species is better adapted to an environment than another one, they will outcompete the less suited species and therefore grow in numbers, sometimes leading to the entire extinction of the other species. We also know that this can be interspecific, okay, between like a lion and a leopard, or it can be intraspecific, such as between two prides of lions, okay, or various leopards in a territory, okay. Then we can get new predators, so these introduce new threats to many species, and some of these species may not be adapted to dealing with those predators. This can lead to the extinction of some organisms. The sea anemone is one which can lead to an ecosystem breakdown. Okay, and then we can have new pathogens. So again, new pathogens, none of the creatures are resistant to that specific pathogen, and therefore it can wipe out entire species if they don't develop immunity towards it. So we've been talking about competition, okay, but there is also interdependence within an ecosystem. Okay, interdependence is when different species within a community are going to rely on each other. Okay, this can be for food, for shelter, for reproduction purposes, okay, such as the wind and pollination. So removing or introducing new species to this ecosystem could imbalance the food chain. Okay, this could be within the predator-prey ratio mainly. Okay, or it could be when another species will encroach on another's territory. So instead of preying on them, it might just lessen their space that they have for nutrients or the space that they have for hunting. Okay. And a stable community is when the biotic and abiotic factors are all balanced and the population size remains constant. And the loss of species are very difficult to replace. Okay, so basically what that's saying is that when an ecosystem is balanced, the amount of births and the amount of deaths of different species is going to be the same, and it's going to be pretty constant. Okay. So if there is a loss of a species completely, it's going to be very difficult to keep that balance up. It's going to reach a new balance, okay, but it's going to be completely different from where it used to be. A good example of this, and I highly suggest going to look at it, is how wolves changed the rivers in the Yellowstone National Park. Okay, I'll give you a quick rundown if you don't want to watch it, but I highly suggest watching how wolves changed rivers. So basically, wolves from Yosemite National Park or Yellowstone had been killed off many years ago. Okay, and they decided to reintroduce them into the ecosystem recently in the last couple of years. And these wolves have changed the ecosystem so much, okay, indirectly of course, that the rivers are starting to change their structure and change how they meander, how they move. Okay, it's really cool. Okay, so here's a practical that you're going to have to know. When we are counting a certain species within an ecosystem, okay, it's not possible to count every single one of them. Well, maybe with an elephant it is. But when it comes to something like a beetle, we still need to know how many there are in the ecosystem sometimes. And how we're going to do that is by using something called the quadrat system. And how the quadrat system basically works is that we're going to take a sample area, okay, it can sometimes be as small as a meter by a meter, or it can be large, a kilometer by a kilometer, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to section it off, okay, into evenly spaced blocks. Those blocks are going to have a known size as well. We're then going to take something called a quadrat, which is kind of like a small box, a small square, okay, shape. And we're going to randomly throw this in around our sample area. Okay, now you can randomly throw it, or you can place it within one of the blocks, or you can just count how many there are in a certain number of blocks randomly. Okay, and we use this formula, so the estimated size of the entire population, so the estimated number, because it will never be 100% accurate, but it actually turns out to be pretty accurate. So it's going to equal to the area of the entire population, okay, divided by the area of the sample size, so the quadrat size, okay, and then multiply that by the average number of individuals in the sample area. So after throwing however many of those things, the squares, the quadrats out, you're going to count how many beetles are in that square, okay, and you're going to come up with an average. And how you come up with that average is going the total number of counted individuals divided by the number of quadrats used, okay. And yeah, that's how you're going to get an estimation about how many individuals there are of a certain species within a large area. Another way is by using the Transect method. Okay, this is more random. You stretch a piece of tape between 2 points, okay, and you're going to count the number of individuals that you find along that sample tape area, okay. And what this is mainly used for is when the gradients of the environment change. And when I say gradients, I'm saying maybe the amount of shade is changing as you go along the tape, okay? Or maybe it's the height, the elevation as you go along the tape, okay? And yeah, it's also going to show you more or less how many individuals there are in each section of the tape. So let's look at competition between animals. So the main thing that animals will compete for is food. Okay. Now when it comes to herbivores, sometimes they're going to feed on many different types of food, so they have quite a diverse diet. Okay. If they don't have a diverse diet, sometimes what they'll do is have grazers and browsers. Okay. So this way they're able to live in harmony with one another. Okay, and they're not encroaching on one another's food sources. A lot of competition comes between predators, okay, as they will both be competing for prey, sometimes different prey, but sometimes the same prey, okay, as well as competition between prey animals to evade your predators, okay, and introducing something like a new herbivore to an ecosystem could drastically reduce the food availability. At the same time, it could offer a new food source for predators. Okay, so it can change an ecosystem quite dramatically if there's a new individual put into it. Then we're also going to have territory. Okay, so most predators are going to have a certain territory that they claim is theirs, and they will fight off any rival predators to that territory. Okay, territory provides shelter, it provides areas to nest, okay, to raise young, it provides food sources, and usually they're going to protect that area. Okay. Mating rights is also something that many animals are going to compete over. So this is more your intra-specific competition, okay, within a species. And obviously the females are going to selectively choose males that are stronger and more fit because they are going to have more preferable genes. Okay, this comes back to our discussion on genetics and evolution as well. So the males with the more advantageous genes are going to be the ones that will reproduce more. So a successful competitor is going to be one that has either outcompeted, so out-adapted the other individuals that may be after its specific food source or its specific territory, or it can be one that has successfully evaded or avoided competition by fulfilling a certain niche that that no other organism is filling. Okay, so this is like the dung beetle. Okay, Great example. There weren't any insects before that would have used animal dung. Now, instead of competing for resources with other insects, the dung beetle adapted to fill this niche, okay, thus allowing it to avoid interspecific competition. So plants are also going to be competing with each other, whether that be for food, whether it be for nutrients or for water. And usually plants are going to be competing with their own offspring, okay, which is why they adapt methods of dispersing their seeds away from the parent plant. So when they have that saying, the apple never falls far from the tree, it's because it's a bad apple. Apples are designed to be eaten and moved away from the parent tree. When there is competition, however, plants will adapt to fulfill a certain niche again. Okay, this can be to have different roots to the plants around them, or possibly, as a wild orchid does, growing on top of a tree instead of on the highly competitive floor of the forest. And yeah, okay, so plants are also going to be competing with one another. You do also get parasitic plants, plants that will also almost make the earth around them uninhabitable. So pine trees and pine forests. There's not much else that grows in a pine forest other than pine trees. This is because those pine needles that they drop blanket the entire pine forest floor, okay, which prevents other plant seedlings from getting the light that they need, as well as making the soil highly acidic. So this means that only other pine tree saplings will be able to grow in that soil. So some adaptations that plants are going to have to allow them to have as little competition as possible while still being able to live in a certain environment, okay, is what we're going to be going over now. Another way that plants have gone to lessen the amount of competition is by adapting to extreme environments. Okay, we call these extremophiles. So if there's no other organism adapted to that environment, there might be a plant that will fill that niche. Okay. Some of the adaptations include that for water retention. Okay, so this can be root systems that are either going to be on the surface of the soil or go deep down. It can be ways of storing water, such as your cactuses, okay, or your cacti. And others will be able to pull water from the air in your very humid rainforest and tropical environments. Okay, they don't even touch the soil, and that allows them to avoid the competition with other soil-based plants. Okay. Another one is flowers producing, a specific scent that will attract their pollinators, as well as changing their surface area. So some plants will have leaves that are able to curl up to prevent water loss. Some of them are also going to have a very waxy cuticle, which is going to prevent evaporation or excess evaporation. And then you're going to have your extremophiles. Now, extremophiles are plants that are adapted for extreme environments. These environments can be ones that are extremely hot, okay, such as in a volcano, where they will have enzymes that are resistant to denaturing, or they'll have enzymes that are able to renature broken enzymes. Okay. Others are freezing tundras. Okay, they might have antifreeze that stops the water in their xylem from freezing, and others are for salty water. Okay, so any plants that grow in salty water, such as seaweed, are going to be able to preserve their water so that the salt doesn't suck it out of their cells. And finally, some adaptations of animals include the adaptation of teeth, to be specific for the needs of the animal. Okay, with herbivores, it's going to be flat grinding teeth, while carnivores are going to have their sharp teeth for tearing. It's also important to know that some of your herbivores are also going to have some pretty sharp and long canines, such as the orangutan that we see over here. Orangutans are mostly herbivores, okay, if not only herbivores, I think, but they have these very long teeth, and it's mainly for fighting. Okay, and that's going to be fighting for a mate or fighting with other animals. Okay. Camouflage is another adaptation that allows animals to blend in with the environment, okay, to either avoid predators or to hunt prey. Cold environments. Cold environments usually have larger animals, okay, and this is to decrease the surface area to volume ratio, okay, so that less heat is going to be exposed to the outside, or less of the animal is going to be exposed to the outside area. You see that as their volume is bigger. So something like a whale, great white sharks, love that cold water. What else? Polar bears, seals, okay, very fat, big animals, okay. Whereas your hot environments are going to have mechanisms to deal with water retention, okay. This can sometimes be like creating very concentrated urine, storing water in fat. They usually have a larger surface area to volume ratio, so the animals are usually quite small. Okay, and this allows for efficient heat transfer. And yeah, so my name is Cameron, and this has been ecology, I think it was. I will see you in the next lesson.